G'day Scarefest fans, Glenn here from fakeshemp.net, here to bring a little bit of an Aussie flavour to Scarefest TV. Every time you see me, we're going to go back in time to look at some of those obscure films from down under, and then we're going to move forward to the present and look at something that's just come out that you might want to look out for. So for the first film, we're going to go back to 1979. This is an awesome vampire film called Thirst. The first bit of backstory you need for Thirst is that this movie came out at a time when the vampire genre had pretty much run its course. There weren't many films like it being made. The Hammer horror films from England had run their course. The American market was starting to shift on the way they told their stories. And so for us here in Australia, Thirst came at the right time. It was classic and yet fresh all at once. So it took the classic vampire lore or mythology, if you will, and gave it a whole fresh new take. The story is about a cult. Well, they kind of present themselves more of a day spa or a mental health retreat, if you will, where they recruit people by telling them that they've got a legacy. If you were just to wander into these facilities, you would see patients roaming the grounds with swimming pools and golf and all these kind of luxury, leisurely activities, but they're in a half comatose kind of state. Doctors walk amongst them in scenes that are really reminiscent of other films of that time, and yet the sinister underbelly of the story is that, of course, this is not a day spa. It is a cult that harvests human blood from its patrons in some very classic style. Anyway, that's the general gist of the story. The lead character is a woman who is told by the cult that she has a legacy left to her by her I guess, ancestor, a countess who was like a head vampire, and she's roped into this whole world against her will. She's unable to escape, but does she succumb to the power of the vampires or does she not? I'm going to leave that for you to discover, because this is a movie you definitely want to track down. Unlike so many Aussie films from the 1970s and 80s, you know, which usually have a very Aussie kind of allure or appeal to them, this one is very international. Yes, most of them have Australian accents, but the actual production value and the production design is of an international standard. As with so many films from then, there's an international cast at play here just to sell the film to the international market. David Hemmings was a famous UK actor who made all kinds of movies both in America and the UK. He was in Gangs of New York, Gladiator, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and then there was Henry Silva, who was a classic American actor that you'd know his face. He was in things like The Manchurian Candidate, Above the Law, Dick Tracy, heaps of others. And so with those names blended in with the Aussie faces, you've got a really appealing film. If you're a real diehard kind of horror fan, you might like to know this one was produced by a guy called Anthony Ganane. He is a name synonymous with Australian exploitation. He produced almost everything that came out of our country that had blood, breasts, sex, violence. This guy was behind all of it, and his films are well worth looking out for. I guess what made this one stand out above the rest at the time was that in the 1970s, this concept of harvesting blood from people was new and fresh, and it was taking that kind of concept from Soylent Green, bringing it into the horror genre, putting the horror genre into the sci-fi kind of realms as well. And vampires at this point in time had never been presented this way, at least to my knowledge. But they certainly have in the years that have passed, and it's a concept that's done over and over these days. And the good news about this one is that you can buy Thirst on Blu-ray. It is a region-free title. So if you were to look it up online and find an Australian Blu-ray of this one, it's region free. You can watch it on your players over there, but it's also released through Severin Films over in the States. I believe that these releases are basically the same. The content is identical. It might be the cover art that's different, so you can be in region free. You can just pick and choose if you want to get it from Australia with, you know, this artwork, or perhaps you want the American artwork. You've got choice. And now to a brand new film that you're going to want to look out for. This one is called Two Heads Creek. It was directed by a guy called Jesse O'Brien. You may have seen his previous film called Arrowhead. Might have also been called Alien Arrival over there. It was a kind of low budget, sort of no escape type of story that had sort of hints of Snake Plissken throughout it. Wasn't a great film by any means, but Two Heads Creek is a very, very strong follow-up. It recently premiered here in some of our film festivals, and hopefully it's going to make its way over to your shores, to some of your festivals. It's a classic fish out of water story, or I guess a city slicker tale about a British brother and sister who travel to Australia to a remote back-end kind of town in search of their estranged mother. Of course, when they get there, the town is full of weird people with a very kind of sinister underbelly that they're not quite sure of. There's a big secret going on, and they're about to find out what that is. And of course, then the movie is full of blood and gore and organs and gruesome stuff flying in all directions, but it is always fun, it's always frivolous, it's a very, very upbeat, quirky, comedic kind of film. It exploits those eccentric characters that you may recognize from classic Aussie cinema, and it kind of plays out like a funny yet grotesque take on the Wake in Fright story. Wake in Fright was a movie from the 70s about another British guy who gets stuck in a small town, and the nightmare of his experience is that he doesn't fit in and that everyone around him has ulterior motives. Probably a better comparison is the Oliver Stone film U-Turn, where Sean Penn gets trapped in a small town. It's that kind of thing. So it takes that story but throws comedy into it, throws blood, severed heads, severed limbs, disgusting stuff. It's delicious. So look out for it. Two Heads Creek. Hopefully it comes to America either on DVD. I don't think it'll get theatrical release, but it might get a festival release. So keep your eyes peeled for film festivals over there, particularly the horror ones. Two Heads Creek, brand new Aussie horror. It's good stuff. Cool, so that's it for me for now. Don't forget, visit me at fakeshemp.net where everything I do is. And I'll catch you next time, Scarefest TV, and back to you, Wes.